If you're on the market for an older boat, there's a few things you'll want to consider. Courtney and I both made the choice to buy older boats, and this path comes with many benefits and challenges. We are taking on these challenges ourselves, but doing so requires us to put in a lot more work. We are working on consolidating to one boat, and in the process we hope to upgrade it to our dream boat. There's also the challenges of trying to get things done in the real world. Life can often throw wrenches in your plans and slow your progress. We want to show you why we think this effort is worth the risk and why we are investing in restoring our boat instead of buying a new one. I've been working on Anticipation for over 6 years, and I'm often asked, why bother with it anymore? Shouldn't I just sell it and buy something new? I bought Anticipation knowing that it would challenge me. Older boats make great learning platforms for honing your technical skills. I've learned basic carpentry, fiberglass work, and engine maintenance, and there's so much more to learn. This is not the path for everyone, however. It does require a ton of work. Let's take a look at some of the ongoing projects on Anticipation and see if this is the right path for you. So one of the advantages of buying an older boat is that you're given a lot more freedom to make drastic changes to how that boat is laid out and functions. Anticipation was built with a 20-gallon auxiliary diesel tank in the starboard side. That space is much more valuable to us as storage space than it is as diesel. We can throw a couple of jerry cans on the deck and that'll do the exact same thing. But because of how it was built into the boat, it's going to be a little bit tricky to get it out. All that red that you see back there, that's foam insulation that got impregnated with diesel. There's a crack in the backside of the tank that had been leaking for I don't know how long. But that is probably why Courtney has been smelling diesel fuel every time she comes on board. I honestly thought that Courtney was exaggerating every time she complained because she has a very sensitive nose. She was actually right. I'm man enough to admit that she is right. I can't tell how this thing is actually held in place right now. I believe it's just kind of glued in, but it's not really moving readily. And my fear is that somewhere on the backside where I can't see it, it's actually fiberglass to the hull. That would be the worst case scenario. But I just got to keep poking and prodding at it until I can get it to move, which might take a while. All this space is now cleared out. I need to put in the parts of the bulkhead that I cut out back over here. I'm going to be epoxying those back in place. We're going to want to let that bond overnight. There appears to be a little bit of a gap at the top. We can fill that in later. The plan with this space is to convert it into more of a storage space. I want to use most of it for like pots, pans, that kind of thing. Courtney would really appreciate having that. My thought is I'm going to put like a sliding door here, that way it doesn't have to open out into this passageway, but then I need to segment it with like a little mini bulkhead at some point because we need to put a refrigerator compressor in. The original compressor was under the sink. It had a very long line to get to the actual ice box, and when you do that, you lose quite a lot of efficiency. So by putting the compressor directly underneath where the ice box actually is, that should help improve the efficiency of any system that we put in and keep it nice and cool. In order to make like a mini bulkhead, I'm going to be using a boat owner's best friend. I used an Amazon box. This is just to make a template. I'm going to have to kind of force it in there, cut it down with a razor blade and force it in there to get it to fit that shape of the hull. And then once I have that shape, I can go cut out some marine grade plywood, tab it in, and get it glued in. That should do the job. We just need something somewhere in here. I haven't really decided how far over yet because we need to get the refrigerator compressor in here to fit it and make sure we have enough space. But that'll do as a template for now. For the edges like this, I need to go first and find a slider rail or something for the doorway mechanism that I want to have. Once that's established and kind of set up in here, I can put leftover teak trim that I have from other projects along here and the edges and come up with some sort of doorway, probably like a plexiglass doorway that can fit over that. And then the last step will probably be to paint this area white with like a bilge paint or something. That way it's nice and clean, it doesn't mildew or anything, and that's really it for this. We now have a bit of a bigger project than what we had started with, and that's a very common theme on older boats. So now let's take a look at some of the other ongoing efforts. You might remember we previously worked on getting the bathroom cleared out and made a mold for a new shower pan. We're now ready to spend some time moving this project forward, but doing so we'll be using a technique for fiberglassing that I'm not very proficient on. I'm actually going to be a little bit naughty today. We're going to be fiberglassing inside the boat, and the reason for that is because I'm going to be using polyester resin for this project. Polyester resin is a little bit more sensitive to humidity and temperature fluctuations while you're using it. So because this inside space is climate controlled and this project's not very big, I'm gonna risk making a mess of the boat and do this the right way. I've already cut my glass mat to about the shape that I need it. We're going to be putting down some white gel coat first and then laminating on about 2 layers of glass mat. That should be all we need for a project like this. It's not a super structural piece, so I don't expect that it'll need more layers than that. It will be supported by the wooden subflooring inside the bathroom, so it doesn't need to be very strong either. The great thing about laminating fiberglass too is if it is weak, we can always reinforce it with more.
I have to wait for this to cure for about an hour, and then I gotta put on this PVA mold release. This stuff will help it cure overnight, make it nice and hard. I can't really breathe that well, so I'm gonna go outside of the boat and wait for this to set up for an hour or so, go get dinner, come back, and then we're going to continue this process. Woo!
Alright, this has cured overnight, and we'll take her off. Ugh. Let's see if we can take it off. I don't want to have to destroy the mold in case I have to redo this, so I'm going to try very carefully to pry it apart. We can see the mold release is allowing the gel coat to pull off of the mold and stick to the polyester, which is good. That's what we want. But I'm gonna have to get a little creative and aggressive with this to get it out. One disadvantage to using polyester that people don't really talk about, it smells way worse than epoxy once it's set. It's gonna be a couple days before the boat can air out. I should probably still be wearing a respirator actually, but the boat's open right now and venting, so I'm not too worried. I think I'm gonna have to break this thing apart. So the good news is that the mold release worked. The bad news is I did not put down nearly enough gel coat. Overall, I'm really happy with how this piece turned out. The texture came out smooth, just like I wanted it to be. There are a few spots where I did too thin of a coat of gel coat. The way that I could have fixed that is do 2 or 3 coats of gel coat before the polyester. It's not super strong, it's kind of flimsy, but that's okay because this is going to be supported by wood and foam and other things that I'm going to put behind it. Overall, this was a pretty worthwhile experience. I think rebuilding a whole shower pan from scratch was a way bigger task than just doing this little section. Anyway, let's go see if it fits in the bathroom. So the floorboard is going to fit. What I want to do is I want to take this hatch that I got on clearance and turn this into the lid for a gray water tank that will fit directly beneath where the toilet sits here. So with everything in position, you'll be able to sit on the toilet here. There's going to be a gray water tank directly below that, integrated into the floor using some materials that I have. I'll probably put a bench and the sink over here, and then we'll just have some empty space with maybe some shelving on this wall over here. Before I integrate all this together, I need to make one more fiberglass piece for the section over here on the hull and figure out how the water lines are going to get run so that they can both empty the gray water tank and supply the sink. I really need to be focused on a few other projects at the moment, so this particular project is going to have to wait here until we can come back to it. Even though we're not finished with it yet, I'm happy to have the experience of molding a fiberglass piece and look forward to finishing it soon. Doing your own fiberglass work on an older boat requires a lot of practice. You'll also be challenged to find good opportunities to get things done. We finally have a good weather window to start working on fiberglassing the deck back together after recoring it. This is by far one of the most technically challenging projects we've had to work on. Very few people do themselves because it is so labor intensive and technically challenging. But I'm excited to have the opportunity to work on this skill because it's something that we can take anywhere we go. I want to start by focusing on the areas where the stanchions for the lifelines attached to the deck, those areas are a little bit more intricate than the rest of the deck. Then we're going to be moving on to the long sections where I cut the deck apart previously. Now normally I would be doing this as a how-to video, but I think in this case it's more valuable to show you not how I'm doing this, but how much work is involved. I was under no delusions that this was going to be an easy task when I started it, but it's so critical to understand your limits when you're choosing a boat to buy. So tomorrow's task is going to be to actually fill in some of those spots that I just ground out, in addition to also getting the chain plates out. That is a separate video, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. Unless I've already released it, in which case go back and watch that one, and then come back and finish this video. But for now, it is dinner time, and I've got to go commute home all the way over to Courtney's boat. We're having curry. Alright, now I'm home, so peace out. Probably one of my most annoying pet peeves is when my hair is long and I'm trying to do fiberglass work and it just gets right in my face. Ugh. I've got a roll of 1708 fiberglass here. This is a glass mat and biaxial hybrid cloth that, according to Boatworks today, it bonds really well with epoxy, and that's why I wanted to try it out for this. Oh, I've also got the Total Boat 5:1 epoxy resin kit. All the sections I just glassed over are now ready for fairing. I've already sanded them and prepped them while the camera was charging. I'm going to be using the Interlux Interfill fairing compound. Most fairing compounds I've used so far, I haven't really noticed a tangible difference between how they turn out. So I'm excited to see how this one in particular turns out. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get it at the same price that I just got it. So if it works out well, I might have to, increase how much I'm spending on this. But just like any fairing compound, it's a two-part system and it should be pretty simple to do. So let's get to it. All the areas that I just did fairing compound on, I now need to sand. I've got 2 grits of sandpaper on my different sanders, the 150 grit followed by the 220 grit. I also have some loose sandpaper and extra sheets. I have to make this as perfectly smooth as possible before I can paint it. If it has any divots, if there's any pinholes, if there's any of that, it'll show up in the paint. So this is really critical to get right. And what makes it really tedious is that as I sand it, I'm finding little low spots that I have to go back and fill back in with fairing compound and then wait another day to come back and sand that down. So this is going to take a while to get right. So I've been called crazy for doing this project by myself, and nobody's going to do it for me. And that's kind of the point, right? That this is a ridiculous project, and most people would just give up and scrap out their boat if this was their boat. But I'm not most people, and I don't want to be. I think this is the most sustainable and interesting way of owning a boat, is doing the crazy that nobody else will. So if you're crazy like me, let me know in the comments. There are a lot of different options for such a large fiberglass repair. I'm choosing to use epoxy because I believe it's the strongest option, and this project requires strength. There is a drawback, however. We need to get it done while we have the weather to do this. If it has to sit for months on end, epoxy will degrade over time in the UV radiation from the sun. Fiberglassing outside requires days that are not too hot or humid, and when there is no rain forecast for several days in a row. This project is not only pushing us to work harder, but also faster, as living on the Texas coast makes days like that rare. Your local climate might be better suited for such a large project, so knowing that in advance might be something to account for when you're making your decision to rebuild a boat. So that storm that just hit, it wasn't forecast to be here until tomorrow. I was planning on fiberglassing the last few sections of deck today, so that would be done before it got wet. Unfortunately, now everything is saturated. It's completely wet. But the more important thing that I wanted to kind of close out with, you might have noticed that Courtney hasn't been in this episode, and there's a reason for that. It's hard to explain, so how about I just show you?
I'm still processing it.
It's okay. Life got in the way. So would you buy an older boat? Older boats are great learning platforms, and they give you the freedom to make the boat however you want it to be. Rebuilding that boat by yourself is possible, but you will have to overcome a lot of challenges to do it. There's no guarantee that you'll ever be able to get it done on some timeline. We've been about 3 to 5 years away from our cruising dream for the last 6 years that I've been working on Anticipation. We're confident we'll get there eventually, but if you're on a stricter timeline, you'll want to go ahead and buy that newer boat that's ready to go sailing as is. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is refitting an old boat the path that you want to take? And stay tuned to see how we face one of our biggest challenges to date.